Hi, Ashley. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad to see your face and see you in person. And I feel like we have kind of got to know each other just a little bit through the few months we've been in touch with one another. But the one thing that I didn't share this before we got on the call, that you have a very strong, quiet, gentle spirit. But what I get from you is that you're like strong, but it's this like quiet spirit at the same time.
I appreciate that. That's so funny. My husband was just saying, how do I condense this story? We were talking about my 2-year-old son who is started preschool and turns out to be kind of shy at the beginning. Like it takes him a minute to open up. And I was saying to my husband, like, where did he get that? Neither one of us is like that. And my husband was like, I actually think you can actually kind of be like that. It's sort of like quiet and you can be sort of shy and then
you
up later.
you blossom out.
Yes, exactly. It just takes a minute. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I appreciate that. I like that.
No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. But you're not wrong.
Yeah, no, but it's something that I've noticed, and that's me. Like I make observations on people, and I feel the necessity to share it. But, anyways,
Well, I love that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So here's the deal. I'm so excited that you're here on Opportunity Knocks, this podcast that has evolved through COVID. And Ashely Lewis is the co-founder of Fleur Marché, which is a CBD company. And what I think is the best way to always start is for people to really get to know you and understand, well, okay, we learned that we both worked at Mattel within 5 minutes of talking to each other. But what was your trajectory before saying, hey, I'm going to do this CBD company?
Totally. So how far back do I go? Well, I guess I can start at the beginning and I'll go quickly. I grew up in Los Angeles, and the only reason that's important is because really, oh yeah, I mean, we're actually rare, right?
Exactly.
But the only reason I say that's important is because I grew up around all of these sort of the film world of film, even though neither of my parents was involved. They're both sort of lawyers and didn't really have an interest in movies, but grew up always thinking I really wanted to be a movie producer. And so in high school, I had internships on studio lots, and in college, every summer I came home and interned at a production company or on a movie set, sort of doing whatever I could. And when I graduated college, I took a year off to travel, but then sort of came right home. And within a week of being home, was working at CAA. And then a year after that, I was an assistant at a production company. And then a year after that, I was sort of promoted to be a junior executive. And sort of, I was on my way, doing the only thing I ever thought I wanted to do. Right. And then a couple years into that, I realized that I didn't love doing it as much as I thought I would. And at that point, it was sort of, that's the only thing I'd ever thought about doing, and had to kind of figure out what was next, and sort of felt like I had no skills other than reading scripts and taking meetings with people, and decided to right exactly. By the way, I don't mean to sound disparaging. I think at the time though, I was just sort of like, oh, what else can I, I have no I'm just a creative. I don't think analytically enough and all this stuff.
Yeah, sometimes
and
we don't see the transferable skills.
100. Well, that's something I've learned so much, is about if you can step outside of yourself to figure out how to tell your story, it's just so much more valuable. But that's a hard skill to refine. But so I didn't want to, felt like I had to go to grad school because I didn't think I had any skills, and I didn't want to go to law school because every single person in my family, including my now husband, is a lawyer. And so honestly, this is the truth. Someone at the production company where I worked was applying to business school. And I was like, all right, I'm going to apply to business school. That's a good idea.
Well, sometimes it only takes somebody giving you an idea.
100%. So I applied to business school. I got in, ended up going to Stanford, which was the most amazing experience. It was just an amazing experience in a lot of different ways. But it was there that I really helped hone what I wanted to do, because when I first got there, I swung all the way to, I'm going to go be in finance, from coming from being a movie development executive, I'm going to go be in finance, or I'm going to be a consultant. And I dabbled in that stuff very briefly, realized that I still needed sort of a creative element to my life. And so kind of swung the pendulum back more towards center to marketing. which felt like a great way to sort of be simultaneously creative, but also sort of like use data and analysis and structured thinking. So graduated from business school, came back to LA and worked at Mattel, which we talked about both sort of having experiences there. I loved my time at Mattel. It was amazing. But a couple years into that role, I got the opportunity to open the LA office of this little known startup called ClassPass, which had just launched in New York, and they needed an LA GM to come launch the operation. And I really always wanted to work at a startup, but coming out of business school, didn't feel like I had the experience or the understanding, which is, I guess, you'll see a theme in my my own story. Yeah. So I left Mattel to go launch the LA office of ClassPass, and then eventually evolved into becoming sort of like the first person on the biz dev team, where I got to work on partnerships with Nike and Outdoor Voices and Sweetgreen. It was a really amazing experience. But the office sort of moved from, it all sort of ended up centralizing in New York City. And being an LA girl born and raised, I really didn't want to leave. And so I decided to sort of look for something else. And that's when I ended up going to Goop to launch essentially the wellness business on the e-com side. So Goop is really known for its clean beauty shop and really being a pioneer in terms of like the clean beauty, both in its own products, other people's products, in content. And they were looking for someone to help them build the commerce side of the wellness business in the vein of the beauty shop. And so I came in to do product development and third-party merchandising. I launched the Goop vitamins, which was great, and worked on a lot of the products that you sort of see coming out today, which just you how long product development takes.
Exactly.
That was years ago. And then through my time at Goop, learned about CBD and was really looking at it as something that I thought that could be valuable for the Goop audience. And I think the big insight that the main insight that ended up driving me to start my own business was that there were all these women who I was talking to and selling products to at Goop who were pretty progressive in terms of their wellness choices, willing to put ashwagandha in their coffee, willing to buy a set of crystals and see how that worked for them. Yeah. Willing to like do a vaginal steam, like they weren't saying no to a lot of things because they were sort of progressive believers in holistic wellness. But when you said the word cannabis to those women, more often than not, you kind of got like this bizarre look and
I don't smoke pot.
Yeah. I don't smoke pot. I don't get high. It has no place in my self-care routine. And the more that I learned about CBD and its benefits, it just sort of, I was like, oh, this is crazy. There's a complete disconnect, and all the issues that these women are saying they have and are struggling with and haven't yet found the right solutions for can be not necessarily fully solved, but certainly augmented with the use of CBD, which, oh, by the way, doesn't get you high. It is a true wellness tool, a healing tool. And so it felt to me like there was just this real break in the narrative, and we needed to reframe what CBD was, and frankly, even more than that, what cannabis was.
Absolutely.
Because cannabis is no longer just something for stoners that gets you high. There's just this new evolution. Like there's so much innovation in product and technology that like it's a tool that you can very specifically control to do what you need it to do. And so and I think as I was telling you earlier, Meredith, my co-founder, was my work wife. She had discovered cannabis separate and apart from me, but we started this like lively conversation about how all these women in our lives didn't understand the value of it and how it could be used to their advantage. And we wanted to sort of go change the narrative on that. And that's what led us to leave and go start Fleur Marché.
Yeah. And how did the name come about, by the way? Just curious.
Yeah, so Fleur Marché
is a very sophisticated name for CBD, which I love. And we talked about packaging earlier, and I believe like the high end, it feels like an exclusive brand, but not exclusive as in not able to actually tap into mainstream people, but more like, oh, this is like, it's something that I want to be a part of. Exclusive, like a beautiful brand.
You're the best. That was exactly the goal. So thank you for saying that. So Fleur Marché is actually the incorrect translation of flower market. It should be Marché au Fleur. But we liked sort of how Fleur Marché sounded, and we kind of liked that it was the incorrect translation.
Yeah.
But flower market was really supposed to be, as I said, like we launched the business as solely as a marketplace. And it was this take on, it was sort of trying to do everything I just explained in terms of changing the narrative. Cannabis is colloquially referred to as flower. And we wanted to reframe what cannabis was really, like as a sort of high-end, more exclusive, more sophisticated thing that we were delivering to you in a marketplace with a lot of different options and choices. So we liked how it sounded, and we liked sort of the connotation of having a French title, and also, delivering CBD products without ever using the word cannabis.
Interesting. So what is the biggest obstacle, when you were starting Fleur Marché? Because it started 2018 or 2017?
We launched our website 2018, but the official launch was 2019, actually.
Okay. And so when you, as two women, it's a kind of a male-driven industry, isn't it, too?
Yes.
Yeah. When you guys entered into this marketplace, what were some of the bigger obstacles that happened for you?
Totally. I mean, well, when we entered, it was, so in 2018, it was still largely male driven, which was a huge part of sort of what we were going after. We wanted to launch this female focused marketplace. But two, it was still kind of the Wild West, because what happened in December of 2018 was that this thing called the Farm Bill passed, which legalized hemp federally.
Okay.
Before that, it was technically federally illegal, which meant that anyone who was operating didn't have access to the resources that a normal e-commerce business would. So for example, we launched on Shopify, but we heard from a lot of people when we were launching, be careful, Shopify will just randomly shut you down because they're anti-cannabis. Then we did more research and realized that people were actually just launching on Shopify without using the right payment processor, and without getting too detailed because it's very boring. But in order to do cannabis, you have to have a high risk payment processor, because it is higher risk. It's sort of along with alcohol and other sort of adult materials. So we had to go figure that out because we were so afraid of ever being shut down. We didn't have access to the same kinds of marketing channels that most other businesses do. So we even still today struggle with Facebook. We couldn't just sort of start posting Facebook ads to get new customers, or even get email addresses to send emails to. We quickly learned that was not available to us. We also had trouble convincing our customers. And I think we talked earlier about sort of the creative ways that we dealt with that. But at the outset, there was a lot of skepticism around, what are you guys doing? CBD, weed, you guys are trying to sell weed and say that it's wellness? No, thanks. And so there was a ton of education that we felt we had to do. And so you'll see we spent a lot of time just writing, wrote a ton of stuff that still lives on the site about what CBD is, what it isn't, what we do to deliver high-end standards, and why you should trust us as a company to help give you your CBD education and product.
Yeah, I think education is such a big key related to the CBD industry, beyond the regulations and all of that, in conversion to the sale, correct?
100%.
So my question around that is, what I would find it would be difficult being a marketer myself is how do you share the real estate space between beauty and education, making sure that there's enough so that people are educated on what they're purchasing?
It's a great question. So we, as I said, we come from Goop, which is a content powerhouse, and has a whole side of the business is just dedicated to delivering top of best in class content. We were not those people. My co-founder and I were on the commerce side of things, and neither one of us is a journalist or even anything close. But we knew that you needed education, and we knew that we had questions when we were approaching this and learning about CBD and thinking about products that we liked that for which there weren't sufficient answers. And so the way that we approached education was really around creating content, whether it was on our site or in our Instagram, or just sort of in our communications with direct communications with customers, that was really meant to, we always said like our education is meant to help drive to purchase. So it's meant to answer the questions that we or our customers have that prevent anyone from making a purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can answer those questions and get you over the hump, then we've done our job. So, and those questions now I think are kind of like, it's very clear. A lot of people do them, but I hesitate to say this, but I actually think it's true. Like we were one of the first companies to have like a CBD 101 page on our site that said, like, had articles like, what is the difference between CBD and THC? Or will I fail a drug test if I take CBD? Or what can CBD actually do for me? And why should I believe you? And so it was all like sort of like very direct content, and also very, like we like to say, snackable. So we did a lot of infographics, a lot of sort of like short form content. Almost, it's almost like a, sorry, my house is crazy. Okay. I don't know if you can hear my dog.
We're all still home.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Of course, it turns out like not in an office yet. But all of that content was again meant to help drive to purchase. So it wasn't. We were really like very anti long articles that make it feel like you have to do the research yourself. We wanted you to be able to read it, digest it, decide how you felt, and then go either, make a purchase or not, or say, I'm going to wait until I see something else about this. So that was our strategy. One, to help sort of make it easy for the customer, but two, to also make space for the product, which really was the crux of what we were trying to do, was help you find products that could make you feel better. So I lost my train of thought. We were talking about, how we designed the website. So very clearly on the website, and again, I hate to take credit for being one of the first to do this, but I really think we were, because we hadn't seen it anywhere else, which is why we did this. We had very specific, like, shop, learn. And
I like that.
Again, simple, not like, not nothing groundbreaking, but we just hadn't seen it. And that's how we wanted to.
Simplification is really hard. It's like, but that's like your marketing background. Most people can't simplify context very easily.
Well, and that was, I think, where we were on the money from out of the gate. We really did have because we had dealt with these issues ourselves. We had a very clear vision for how to talk to our consumer and how to get them engaged. And I think, that it worked, which was great.
Yeah. So what would you say that you're known for? So we know that the CBD industry is continuing to grow, and some may say it's saturated. Some may say they are not clear on like how to shop it, where to shop it. I mean, like you were kind of just mentioning, I find your website actually quite easy to shop. But again, it's like you have you're very directed, you direct your consumer. So my question for you is, what are you most known for, and how do people find like what product they're looking for?
Yeah, so I think we're most known for quality, sort of, and in terms of not only our curation, but our vetting standards in terms of sort of like product integrity. So quality and then quality and brand. Like I think we have seen over the past 3 years. So I would venture to say the majority of new CBD products that come out on the market, certainly in the DTC space, because we have those companies asking to be featured on our site because they know that it lends a certain credibility to be on Fleur Marché. So I think that's what we're most known for. But then to answer the second question, sort of how do you find a product on our site? I think we're also really specific about how we help direct you. So you can shop by need, by format, by brand. You can take a quiz. There's a quiz that sort of pops up right when you get to the site asking if you sort of want personalized recommendations. We try to give you every possible avenue to get to the answers that you personally need. And that's also actually entailed over the course of the 3 years. Our assortment started small, it expanded as there were more available brands that met our standards, and then it actually contracted again as we never wanted to be the site that carried 50 tinctures, because again, like that was sort of counter to the goal of being a one-stop shop where you could really figure out how CBD could help you. And if you were sort of spending your time sorting through 50 tinctures and trying to figure out how they were different, we weren't really doing you the service that we set out to provide. And so now the assortment has contracted again. And we really have like one best in class product from most categories, because we just feel like that's all you really need. And so again, I think it's sort of, again, just being known for quality in terms of curation, vetting standards and brand is really sort of what people say to us too. What people get complimented, which we love. That's sort of what people talk about.
Yeah. When we came on the call, before we got on to the actual recording, you were talking about the pillars of your business. How did you go about, so like, a lot of the women that listen to our show are people that are either trying to actually decide if they want to move into entrepreneurship, or they're entrepreneurs, but they're trying to figure out how to get there. And so, you have a background where you've done product development and other things, but how do you go about picking your pillars and why?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because it could all get sort of, if you think about it too much, it can get really hard to you're like, well, is that the pillar, or is that a sub pillar, or is that an umbrella? Our pillars, I will say, are transparency, trust, and curation. Those are the things that were most important to us, and I think it ended up coming from a lot of work between the two of us. Like, we were going to, again, expand and contract what we were about and what we were supposed to be doing, but then we just kept trying to like force ourselves to drill down and hone in on what is it like that we're trying to do at the core. What do we want to do? And that the answer was help women feel better. And
sometimes,
which is still, it can be
that basic, right?
Right, exactly. And but it was hard to get to. That feels so simple, but it's big, right? It's big, and also it was hard. We're like, well, we want to help them feel better with CBD, and then we kept having to sort of like really police ourselves and say, no, we just want to help women feel better. And then it was sort of, how do we do that, and how do we do that best? And that's where we came up with transparency, trust, and curation. And we had a lot of pillars we were deciding in between, but for us, we just kept coming back to those three because we felt like that was the unique service we could provide. And that we weren't seeing anyone else in the industry at that time really offer. So no one was transparency. I don't even know that other CBD businesses at the time were trying to be opaque, but they just weren't being transparent. It was really hard to understand what they were saying and how they were telling you that their product was good. Curation, there was no one doing this when we launched. Like, no one sort of had this marketplace with a lot of different products that you could sort of sort through and choose. And then trust. I get, like, coming from Goop, we knew that how important that was. Listen, Goop has its detractors, but for everyone in the Goop universe who even a little bit sort of respects or trusts what Goop is doing, that like, if there's a product on their site, like, you don't really have to think more about it. It's clean, it's good for you, it's high end, like, you're done. And that was really the same. Like, that was something that both of us loved about working at Goop, and loved working on behind the scenes to make sure that it was worthy of that. And so that's something we wanted to do again, because we found it to be, Goop is a really valuable resource. Even if you think the prices are expensive, even if you think like some of the stuff is ridiculous, like, everyone kind of in the back of their minds, like, all right, Goop,
it's like a check mark. That
exactly.
You're gonna get quality. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
It's been vetted.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, so when you're looking at like the growth trajectory of your business, and you started it, 2018, 2019, really, and as you continue, like, did you see a big growth spurt, given e-commerce and where like kind of retail's going when COVID hit, or how do you see that happening for you guys?
We saw it's so funny, because in the course of 2 weeks in March 2020, we went from thinking that our business was over, because I remember, I don't know why we thought this, but essentially when LA locked down, we had a small office where we self-warehoused all of it. We send out every order ourselves. And when LA was locking down, we initially thought that we weren't going to be able to even access our office anymore. And so, which is, it again shows you how far we've come. But I remember that second week in March, where we literally were having conversations like, okay, I guess we're done. This is crazy, but are we done? And then within a month of that, so it wasn't 2 weeks, but within a month of that, all of a sudden we realized we could go back to the office if we had to send out orders.
I think there were so many unknowns.
Right. But then the swing was so drastic. All of a sudden we started seeing like better days and numbers than we had seen ever. And I remember April 20th, which is a huge, 420 just in our industry, no matter what you sell, it like is a huge day. I mean, we had one of our best days still to date ever, that April 20th. And we were like, what? I remember just looking at incessantly refreshing Shopify and being like, oh my God, there's just like more keeps coming. Like people are still ordering. So we saw a huge spike over COVID, especially as the health and wellness business just sort of took center stage. So that was really exciting. That was really exciting. And I think gave us a really great like launch pad to figure out how to continue to grow this business and what our customer is actually looking for, which was great. So that really did help jumpstart the business in an exciting way.
Oh, and what would you say were your leading products during that time?
Anything having to do with stress and sleep. So, and format differed. I think what we did see gummies for the first time start to pull ahead when we launched the business. And this is just sort of because I think of what was available at the time, but tinctures, CBD tinctures really were sort of like the thing, which was always confusing to us because we found those to be the most confusing products. You put it under your tongue, you put it over your tongue, how much do you dose? Exactly.
Yeah.
But we started to see gummies surge ahead because I think they're easy. They're kind of delightful. Like, they taste good.
Yeah, they do.
And it's very clear what the dose is. If one gummy doesn't work for you, try another one. If that doesn't work, try another one, whatever the case could be. So, but anxiety and sleep, which is probably no surprise, really were the front runners in terms of category.
And I'm sure it still continues to be that one in a lot of ways.
100%.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm just actually writing a blog post on stress, and one of the suggestions is around CBD. Because I think often people, again, trying to destigmatize CBD, number one, but number two, it's like people will immediately talk about meditation. Well, not everybody can tap into that quite as easily, but like you said, 100%. You can take a gummy or tincture and help yourself kind of come down a little.
I saw a girlfriend this weekend who was telling me that she's an avid CBD gummy taker. And it's funny because you wouldn't think so if you saw her. She's just like sort of so buttoned up and so.
Those are the ones that need it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and she has 3 children, 2 of whom are twins, all under 5. And I said to her, like, when do you take a gummy? And she says, I take one religiously every single night at 7 p.m. because we're starting bath and bedtime. I know I have 2 hours. Exactly. She said, I have 2 hours of like corralling 3 children. Her husband is a movie producer and oftentimes off on a set. And she's like, I can't get drunk because I need to have all my faculties available. And I don't want to obviously get high because, again, same reason.
Then I can't.
But I need to have, I need to have something help me, my blood pressure go down so that I can be the best parent I can be. And I won't go a night without it. And it was such a great story to me. I loved that.
It is a great story. I don't think she's alone, clearly.
Right. Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me, can you actually, like when, I want to diffuse any misnomers. So you cannot get high from CBD, correct?
Correct.
Unless there's THC in it.
Exactly. So CBD by definition hemp by definition is less than 0.3% THC. That's federal law. CBD from hemp-based CBD, therefore, has less than 0.3% THC, which again cannot get you high in any way. If there is THC specifically included in a product, you will feel more. And with certain smokable products, there's latent THC that sort of like lives in a lot of these sort of cannabis products that when heated can sort of activate. And so certain, you'll see like with vapes or with pre-rolls, they call them, which are essentially, it's like a fancy name for joints these days. Mm-hmm. With a CBD pre-roll, we talk about how it gives you kind of like a body high, but it's not, you're not high, but you're not high. Like a body buzz. I'm sorry, we don't call it a high, we call it a body buzz.
Body buzz.
That comes from the fact that a little bit more THC is being activated once the product gets, but again, none of this will get you high. No products that we're legally allowed to sell have higher than the limit of THC, and which is again defined so as to prevent anyone from getting high or feeling like you've ingested THC when you didn't want to.
Yeah, because I think it's important, like we were talking about education earlier, to diffuse that so that people in all generations are educated and aware of that, because there are so many things that that CBD helps with pain
Totally.
management, which is such a big thing related to the 40 plus generation.
100%. And one thing I should mention, the reason CBD doesn't get you high is it's scientific chemical. CBD interacts with your body. We all have what's called an endocannabinoid system,
Mhm.
which is a series of like receptors that help sort of regulate your key systems in your body, your nervous system, your immune system, metabolism. THC binds with those receptors. Or CBD does not. And they're still figuring out exactly what it does, but essentially what the best way to say it is that it kind of like gives them a little tickle, like it does not bind with them, but instead helps the receptors to do their job better, which is to better regulate your systems and bring them to homeostasis. But because we know that CBD does not bind with the receptors, that we also know that it has a very different effect, which is why it does not get you high.
Exactly. So interestingly, though, on the reverse, there are people that sometimes say, well, CBD doesn't really work, so you have to use the ones with THC related to sleep specifically. So what are your thoughts around that? Because I mean, I maybe I'm a lightweight or something, but I feel like CBD helps on its own with sleep.
Totally. So see, we say on our site, every body is different. And
Mhm.
as with anything, some people who, react differently to Tylenol, right? So your body may react differently. And there are people who think it's all sort of hocus pocus. There's a lot of studies that are showing that it's not. The more that CBD, the federal government, and frankly, the FDA allow for testing and studies, the more information we're getting that it really does sort of work and is efficacious without THC. The best example of that is actually the only FDA approved CBD product is called Epidiolex, which is used specifically for very rare pediatric epilepsy diseases. So there's two sort of like, pediatric epileptic diseases for which CBD is used, and it has been shown to be very effective, so much so that it has now been approved by the FDA. So we know that CBD works. Yeah, we know that CBD works. Whether your one's system is sort of resistant to CBD without THC, like I think that's debatable. We also, but again, we also know that in certain cases, like for pain, the major studies that we trust have been studied with THC and CBD, and they believe that sort of those two in conjunction are really effective. That's not to say that CBD alone isn't effective.
Exactly.
It can just be more effective, but that's not for sleep. That's specifically for pain. So I think that's all to say. This is all like a case by case basis, and that's something that's frustrating as someone who is in the CBD industry, because I can't say to you like this will work.
Totally.
But I can say that like there's a lot of evidence to show that it does work, and you just have to be more specific when you're saying like, does CBD work? Like you have to be actually kind of specific. For sleep it works this way, for pain it works that way,
But I think that's the thing is that say for example, if we're even talking about the prescription drug industry, right, is that when people are put on medication, they're not guaranteed it's going to work and what the side effects are. So in which case, often they have to try different medications in order to see which one does take effect. So it's not unsimilar to that. So anyways, that I think it's an interesting thing for us to look at. So I want to ask you a couple more questions. The first of which is, tell me, like, what would you say to a female entrepreneur who's looking to launch and feels like they're lacking their tools? You kind of touched on it earlier about, you basically went back to business school because you were like, well, maybe I don't have all the tools that it takes, but what would you say to them now?
Totally. And I would say, listen, I loved business school, and I would do it all over again. I had a great time. I learned a lot. It was fabulous. I don't think you need to go to business school to launch your business. I actually think for a lot of people, it's a waste of time. I think first and foremost, you need conviction about your idea. You do need to believe, regardless of what anyone tells you, that there is a way that you can make this work. And you need to kind of have that like sort of blind faith, because there will be so many people and who tell you that it's a bad idea. There will be so many challenges that you never anticipated that will make you sort of spend a day feeling like questioning all your choices and why did I do this?
Why did I do this?
So you really have to be excited about the idea and have a clear vision for how it can work. It can't just sort of be like, well, let's try it and I'll see. Because I think that it's just too hard if you're going to do that. Like you really have to sort of have even if that plan changes a million times, you need to at least start with sort of like, I see this and I see what it could do for people. And then the second part is I think you do need a little bit of validation. When I was in business school, it called product market fit is the technical term for it. And I always was sort of like a little judgy. I was like, product market fit, like I'm a marketer. What is that? Like you can sell anything to anyone if you can sort of tap into what they need, and give them what they need, not sort of trick them, but sort of like tap into what service they're lacking and help them find it. But I do think if you have this vision, you have this idea, go talk to people about it. Make sure that the reaction you're getting is one of like, oh yeah, I do wish that existed, or I don't think that problem is being effectively solved. And that doesn't mean that if you're developing a product that is already on the market, you can't do it better. You just have to make sure that your unique point of view is actually unique and value add. Because if it's not, it's just, you're going to go pound the pavement and work so hard and not be guaranteed. I mean, you're never guaranteed success, but I think you're almost like unguaranteed success if you develop something that no one wants or no one can use.
When you first, we talked about this before we got on the recording, but when you first started seeding your products, like, and I'm kind of envisioning them a little bit like salon dinners, but when you're doing nonprofit, but or let's just call them like pop-ups, right? Where you'd go to somebody's house, you'd show the product. Did they taste test too there?
Yeah, so we didn't have a ton of gummy. We had like 1 or 2 gummy products. We basically would do what you're referring to. We do these things, we call them trunk shows all over the country. We would go into women's homes, someone would host, and we would bring fun food and cocktails and open up our trunk and like set up this beautiful display of CBD products and do a quick little talk about what CBD is, what it isn't, what it can do for you, and what it won't do for you, and then invite women to try. And yeah, we had tinctures, we had topicals, we had beauty products. We sort of had everything for them to try then and there. And not as often at those specific trunk shows, but we also did a ton of like craft fairs and IRL experiences where, especially with our pain topicals, people would say like, does this really work? My knee hurts. Is this going to do anything? And we'd say, why don't you put it on, go walk around for an hour or two. And then if it works, come back and we're happy to sell it to you.
Yeah.
And 90% of the time, and the only reason I say 90 as opposed to 100 is just because, again, every body is different, but 90% of the time, those people came back and said, yeah, this is amazing. Please give me 2, So it was really important to us. We never wanted it. We never wanted to, and never wanted it to be perceived that we were trying to pull one over on anyone. So, come try it. Tell us what you think. And if it doesn't work, you don't like it. Yes, we have a return policy that, if it's with opened product, it's hard because we can't reuse it. But our official policy is you have to have an unopened product to return it. But I shouldn't say this out loud. We take everything back. If you're not happy with, because again, like if you're not happy with your product, we don't want, we're not trying to
pop-ups?
Say it again.
Trunk shows? Do you still do trunk shows?
So we stopped doing them when COVID hit, but it's so funny. We're just having conversations again about like how we're going to get started. But we
have
also
an opportunity for you to do that in November.
Please let me know. Please, yes. And also, as we've now launched our own product, you can now sort of find us in more retail stores, which is exciting. So there are a lot more ways to shop Fleur Marché IRL, as we say.
Oh, good. Well, that's good to know.
Recently. Yeah.
Okay. So my other question is, and it kind of goes back to your pillars, but you're in a business where you have a partner. Okay.
Yep.
You have your value set. She has her value set. how are your core values working in conjunction separately, first of all, but then with one another? Because I think
Totally.
that's often like people are often like, oh, do I want a business partner? I hear that's hard. I'm not sure. So that's one of the reasons why I'm asking.
Yeah. My answer is I think one, it is hard. We were really good friends, and that can be hard because just because you're good friends doesn't mean you see the world the same way, and I think um, we certainly our first year of business really had to figure out how we worked together, how those values align. I mean, the places where we were aligned were never an issue, right? We were like, quality is so important to us, brand is important to us, communicating with the customer and like what role we want to play in the customer's life is, was always sort of very clear. Um, but there are certain things I don't actually think there were ever places where someone was like, this is important, and the other person was like, no, I hate that idea. It was just sort of like where we focused our time. So for example, in a great way, like Meredith is really focused on like sort of environmental impact and waste and like, sustainability and social equity and things like that. Not things that I think all of those things are of the utmost importance. I just didn't naturally gravitate towards like, oh, we got to solve these problems. And she's really pushed us to be like, we got to focus on these problems. Um, and I think the push and pull of where you focus your very limited time is kind of how you're like what our struggles have been in terms of aligning with values. Um, and I even taking a step back, I would say like, if you're going to start with a partner, you probably should have an initial gauge or gut check of like, do our core values align? Because Meredith never said anything where I was like, who am I in business with? Like that
Yeah.
is, that would never happen because I know who she is, and that's why I started a business with her, right? Because like she's fabulous at her core, and beyond that. But I think where the issues happen are, one, if you didn't gut check that, if you sort of like went into business with someone you didn't really know and then learn later on, like, oh wow, we see the world really differently, like too differently for it to be a value add.
Mhm.
Meredith and I think wherever we see the world differently, it may have resulted in temporary conflict or
Mhm.
disagreement, but it has always led to a better outcome than we otherwise would have without, if we were on our own.
I think in general, like what you're, it's kind of like it goes back to the clarity, right? And I think one thing like for women is being comfortable with conflict because conflict is normal,
Ah,
men get in conflicts all the time, but doesn't stop them from being friends with one another or being business with each other or whatever it might be. So I think it's great that you guys were able to see that in advance. And what would you
totally.
say like some of your core values are?
I mean, first and foremost is really integrity. Like
Mm.
I want people to, we say we're doing all this stuff. Like we have these pillars with the business, and we say we want to do all these things. And I want to make sure, it's important to me that we're actually doing them in the best possible way. Um, and so we spend a lot of time talking about how do we be our authentic selves? How do we actually deliver on this thing that we've said we're going to do? Like, are we delivering on it enough? Like not even enough, but like to the best of our ability. Like maybe
Mm.
we don't want to just deliver on a little. We want it to be the core of who we are. And
Yes.
so we spend a lot of time, I think, being hard on ourselves in a good way about like, are we who we say we are? And are we
Mm.
delivering or adding the value that we set out to add?
Yep.
So that's the most important thing to me is again, integrity. And then I think like attached to that, but is also being a value add in the world. Like I want to deliver a service that helps people feel better.
Mm.
Because I think like throughout your career, and I have a lot of friends right now who are, have young kids who are thinking about their careers and, is this what I want to do with my
I want.
life? And yeah, exactly. Like, what do I want? Like, and even if, some of them are sort of like, do I want to raise my kids? Others are, do I want to be in a career where I'm hawking this product or that product and don't feel like I'm really adding value for the world that my kids are going to live in? And so, for me, whenever I hear people tell stories about taking our products and it helping them, like that's why, it is why we do it. And I think, um, if I didn't feel like we were adding that kind of value, if I was sort of selling widgets, it would be a lot harder for me to do this on a daily basis because it's hard. Like there's a lot of challenges, a lot of things that go wrong, a lot of, just sort of like, oh, why did I do that? Or why did this happen this way? Or can't catch a break. But then when people are like, oh, I took your product and I can put my kids down for bath time without screaming at them, I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah, that, I mean, it makes you realize you're doing great things in the world, which is
Yes,
what drives us forward, right?
exactly.
Yeah. So I just want to thank you for your time today because we have limited time.
Yes.
I could talk to you forever because
I know, this is so
yeah,
wonderful.
so great to get to know you and understand Fleur Marché more. And I would love for you to leave us with where they could reach you and purchase your products. But in addition, anything additional that you would like to tell them would be great.
Yes. So you can read, we're at fleurmarche.com. It's kind of hard. It's FLEURMARCHE, which is, complex name to spell, but once you
But
get
it's
there, you'll be happy.
an awesome name.
Thank you. So fleurmarche.com, but also you can find our products starting this fall. We're in Nordstrom, select Nordstroms around the country. We are in Foxtrot Market, which is a sort of high-end grocer in the Midwest. And then a bunch of other sort of independent retailers across the country, but like a Chen Beauty in Brooklyn. We're on anthropology.com, revolve.com, soon to be urbanoutfitters.com. So you can find us there or just come to Fleur Marché. And then the only thing, one thing we didn't sort of touch on, I mentioned it, but we launched our own product February of this year. And that really came out of us observing the market and really being able to see a white space where we didn't think the customer was being effectively served. So we now have these wellness patches. We would love for anyone to try them. If anyone who's listening to this podcast wants a discount and wants to try one for free, I am happy to send them out. We want them out to the world. Really,
Well, we'll have to put that on like on the post that we do too.
Oh yeah,
to release it. We can actually put the discount code or whatever you want to use.
Perfect. Yes,
Yeah.
we'll get so that we can get patches on arms, as we say. And this fall or this winter, hopefully we will be coming out with new patches that actually don't have CBD. For those of you who are still afraid of CBD and aren't yet ready to totally dive in, we'll sort of have a more entry-level product that can help you feel good about sort of plant-powered wellness, which is what we're all about.
Well, thank you so much, Ashely. I love the fact that you are changing lives and that you are making an impact for the greater good for people. And like you said, it's just it's as simple as that, is wanting to help women and help them feel better. So
Exactly.
and that's what we're all trying to do here. So that's amazing.
100%. Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be asked, and this is really fun.
Oh, good. Well, there'll be more fun times. Like
Great.
I said, I
Can't
think
wait.
there's something in November. I'm going to have you come do a pop-up.
I love it. Okay, great.